Good afternoon. Welcome to the first Bureau of Business Research webinar of the 2023 Spring Series. Today we'll be looking at the results of the study, the economic impact of Nebraska military assets, an update for fiscal year 2021. This is a study that was completed through a collaboration between the UNL Bureau of Business Research and the Nebraska Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs. Today's presentation is sponsored by the Bureau of Business Research within the Department of Economics at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. My name is Mitchel Herian. I serve as a project director here at the Bureau of Business Research. Today I'm joined by Phil O'Donnell, who serves as the Military Affairs Liaison with the Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs here in Nebraska. Dr. Eric Thompson, the director of the Bureau of Business Research, was also a co-author on this report, but is not here today. Before we begin presenting the results of the study, I would like to point out several features of the webinar. As you can see, we'll be using a PowerPoint presentation via Zoom to present the information to you today. I will also one feature of the webinar is a chat window where you can chat with other participants in the webinar. We also have a question and answer window that you can type in any questions that you might have. I will point out that we will not be answering any questions until the end of the webinar after all the information has been presented. I will now turn the presentation over to Phil, who will provide an overview of the Commission on Military and Veterans Affairs and who will briefly describe the purpose of the report. Phil?
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, Mitch, and thank you to the audience for your active interest in military and veterans affairs in Nebraska. Established in 2016, the 11-member Commission on Military and Veteran Affairs strives to preserve and protect military installations across the state, track new missions to these military installations, and serve Nebraska's military and veterans families. Voting members of the commission include the Director of Nebraska's Department of Economic Development, the Adjutant General of Nebraska's National Guard, the Director of Nebraska's Department of Veterans Affairs, and 3 appointed members from each of Nebraska's 3 congressional districts. Additionally, the commission has 5 ex officio non-voting members. These members include the Veterans Program Coordinator with the Nebraska Department of Labor, the Chair of the State Committee of Nebraska's Employer Supportive Guard and Reserve Organization, the Commander of the 55th Wing, the Commander of the 557th Weather Wing, and the Commander of the U.S. Strategic Command. The key deliverable of the Commission is its annual report to the Governor and the Legislature. Since 2017, the Commission has contracted with the Bureau of Business Research to assess the economic impact of Nebraska's military assets. In addition to the economic impact, the annual report includes a summary of military assets, along with Commission recommendations. Please know that the entire Commission report is available on the website veterans.nebraska.gov, and you'll find prior year reports, along with more information regarding Nebraska's Commission on Military and Veteran Affairs. The aim of this slide is to simply illustrate the presence of both military and VA facilities located throughout the state. These VA facilities include readiness centers, bases, medical facilities, and so you can really see that there's a statewide presence in Nebraska.
Okay. So as Phil mentioned, the BBR has been working with the Commission for the past 5 years or so on this report. Each year, we complete several tasks. Specifically, we examine military assets here in the state. So this includes the Department of Defense active duty personnel, the Nebraska National Guard and Air National Guard, and reserve components here in the state. Beyond the military installations here in Nebraska, we also examine Veterans Affairs spending, so dollars that flow in to support vets here in the state. Retiree payments, so DOD retirees that are eligible for retirement and pension payments here in Nebraska. GI Bill dollars that flow to participants in the state, and Corps of Engineers spending here in Nebraska. Data for all these sources of spending come from publicly available sources or from direct correspondence with individuals in applicable organizations. The information we obtain from publicly available sources and through correspondence are used to first show the direct spending that occurs in all these different, through all these different spending flows. And later on, as I'll show, these numbers are also used to generate an economic impact estimate. This slide here shows the spending and personnel supported by the military assets here in Nebraska. So the first row, you can see Offutt Air Force Base and U.S. Stratcom, located in Bellevue, near Bellevue, support nearly 8,800 personnel and spend about $1.37 billion in fiscal year 2021. The Nebraska National Guard and Air National Guard employed 4,355 individuals and spent about $239 million in fiscal year 2021. Reserve components here in the state employed just under 2,000 individuals and spent about $58.1 million in the state. And U.S. Army Corps of Engineers employs 709 people at its headquarters in Omaha and spends about $59 million as far as fiscal year 2021 goes. As I mentioned, we also consider DoD retiree payments that flow to eligible individuals in the state. This slide simply shows the numbers for fiscal year 2021, the number of individuals that receive retiree payments in Nebraska, broken out by military branch. It shows the monthly payments in millions as well as annual payments. In total, there are 13,492 individuals in fiscal year 2021 that received compensation payments from the DoD. In total, there are just under $400 million that flowed to these individuals in fiscal year 2021. I will point out that this number has decreased slightly in recent years. So 13,492 is down just about 100 from last year and maybe 200 from a previous year. The primary driver of this decrease are the number of Air Force retirees in Nebraska. And the source of this information, if you're interested in finding this, is at the bottom of the slide, but this is from the DoD Office of the Actuary. Next, we consider federal VA spending here in the state. These numbers come from the VA geographic distribution on expenditures. You can see about $1.5 billion were spent in fiscal year 2021. The largest proportion of these dollars were spent on compensation and pension and for medical care for vets here in Nebraska. These numbers are down just slightly from fiscal year 2020. Not a great deal, but just a little bit. To give viewers an idea of where these dollars are spent, we present a map here where darker colors indicate higher levels of spending. Not surprisingly, higher levels of spending are found where around population centers here in the state. So Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster County are the largest recipients of VA dollars in Nebraska. Beyond those three counties, however, Hall, Cass, Buffalo, Lincoln, Scottsbluff, and Madison all saw fairly high or relatively high levels of spending as well. To standardize these numbers, we next move to just look at the number of the amount of spending per vet in each county. So again, darker colors represent higher levels of spending. So you can see the patterns look a little bit different here. So we're seeing higher levels of spending per veteran in sort of central Nebraska and western and northwestern Nebraska. Specifically, Franklin, Greeley, Garfield, Sheridan, Hall, and Brown counties see relatively high rates of spending per vet. As mentioned earlier, the direct spending, so all these various aspects of spending or spending flows here in the state of Nebraska are used to generate an economic impact estimate. Using IMPLAN, sort of an industry standard software to generate these estimates, we find that military bases have about $2.471 billion in output, supporting 24,176 jobs in the state and about $1.39 billion billion in compensation, employee compensation. Military retirement system payments have about $413 million in output, supporting 2,683 jobs. VA spending, $2.15 billion in output, supporting about 16,363 jobs. And you can see the numbers for Corps of Engineers and GI benefits as well. I would point out, if we don't necessarily combine these numbers in our report, but just for the viewers' information today, combined these impacts account for about $5.21 billion in output and supporting 44,846 jobs here in the state of Nebraska. And I would point out that these numbers are fairly similar to the numbers we saw in fiscal year 2020.
I would just offer, Mitch, that the IMPLAN is the industry standard for sort of public policy research, and
Right.
it's a tool. It's both a sort of an art and a science in how you use that. And I think one of the benefits of working with the Bureau of Business Research is their capability and capacity to use IMPLAN, not only for military and veterans affairs spending, but for in other industries as well.
Right.
So,
That's correct.
So,
Thank you.
yep.
So each year, in addition to the economic impact portion of the study, as Phil noted earlier, we also do put forth policy recommendations. Each year, we also do what we call special studies or additional studies that are of interest to the Commission. The past couple of years have focused really on federal contracting here in the state of Nebraska. So the federal government conducts business with a wide range of entities throughout the state. This analysis seeks to better understand how those dollars are distributed to different parts of the state, as well as which industries are seeing the greatest amount of business activity with the DoD and the VA. To obtain these numbers, we went to usaspending.gov, where you can download federal contracting data. In this case, we focused on contracts where Nebraska was the place of performance. Okay, so it may have been an outside business that holds a contract, but Nebraska was where the business took place, where the actual activity took place. To give everyone a sense of what this looks like over time, so the past 5 years, so fiscal years 2017, 18, and 19, federal contracting dollars flowing into the state were around $800 million. Fiscal year 2020 bumped up to just over $1 billion, and fiscal year 2021 was back down to about $850 million. The next slide just presents the agencies and sub-agencies that are letting the contracts out to businesses here in the state. So not surprisingly, the Department of the Air Force had the highest dollar amount of contracts with Nebraska businesses or contracts where Nebraska was a place of performance, with about $457 million. Next was the Department of the Army with $173 million, and then the Department of Veterans Affairs with about $170 million. Together, those three entities account for about $800 million of the total $850 million that we saw in fiscal year 2021. Next, to understand where the dollars are flowing to, again, not surprisingly, we see Sarpy County, where Offutt and Stratcom are located, as the county with the highest dollar total of contracts in the state. Next is Douglas County, and third is Madison County. And I believe there is some construction activity that took place in Madison County. To me, it's somewhat surprising that it was ahead of Lancaster County, but again, I think there's some construction that took place up there this past fiscal year. In total, 44 counties had some sort of business activity or contracts related to DoD or VA spending in fiscal year 2021. So that means 49 counties did not experience any, did not have any businesses doing business with the DoD or the VA in fiscal year 2020. And finally, to give everyone an idea of the industries in which dollars are being spent, We see, I guess I should point out that we break out industry by North American Industry Classification System codes, so NAICS codes. And these are very broad general categories that seek to allow individuals to see what industries, very broadly, in which dollars are being spent. So professional, scientific, and technical services was the industry that saw the greatest amount of spending. Next was construction of buildings, and heavy and civil engineering construction was third. And these categories, these three industries, are also where we saw the greatest amount of spending in fiscal year 2020. So it's pretty stable there, at least for the past couple of years. With that, I will turn it over to Phil to discuss some of the commission recommendations.
Thanks, Mitch. For 2022, the Commission continued to put forth 6 recommendations that have their roots in the 2008 Base Realignment and Closure Task Force report. These recommendations include adjusting state operations and maintenance funding for the National Guard to at least the rate of inflation, supporting local subdivisions in their efforts to improve military installations, and ensuring governmental entities and developers consider encroachment issues when building near military installations. The other Commission recommendations include encouraging partnerships with the Department of Defense, supporting legislation or regulatory reform which improves employment and educational opportunities for military personnel and their families. And we have a legacy recommendation to provide state income tax exemption on military retirement pay. Please be sure to read the full report for additional context and an assessment of progress toward each of these 6 recommendations. Of note, the Commission also has a section assessing progress toward the Department of Defense's Defense State Liaison Office's key issues, and we also assess the preliminary impact of recent military and veteran-related Nebraska legislation going back to 2010. So with that, I believe we're going to open the floor to any questions from the audience. So, and then while we're waiting for questions, I will, highlight. There's a new photo of the brand new runway at Offutt Air Force Base.
Okay. While we are waiting for questions, we can also move to the next slide. If you wanted to contact Phil or I for any reason, if you had questions about this report after the presentation's finished, please feel free to contact either of us. Now, I would also like to point out that we have another BBR webinar coming up here in March, assessing the impact of the Nebraska Business Innovation Act. We'll wait just another minute or two to see if there are any questions that come in. I don't know, Phil, do you have anything else to say about the other new photos here?
No, it was an exciting September to reopen the runway at Offutt Air Force Base, and a lot of those photos are from that event. The sunset pictures from that event is the first RC-135 to land on the new runway, and then in the bottom right corner that's the first aircraft to come in. So there's a lot of effort. Fortunately, we had unwavering support of Nebraska's congressional delegation to get the runway funded, and it made for quite a day. So,
okay, great. Okay, with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'd just like to thank Phil and the Commission for their continued partnership on this report. We really enjoy working on this study each year. Always learn more about this domain. So we really appreciate it and hope to continue to work together if possible in the future. So.
Yep. And thank you to the audience. So.
All right, with that, I think we'll go ahead and conclude. Thanks a lot.
Yep.